Hey, Iostax here, former head coach of Excel2 Academy and Uprising Academy North American Contenders. Today I'm going to address another question from my Ask Stux Anything channel. If you want to ask your own questions, simply head down to the description, join the Discord and ping me in the channel. Today I'm going to go over a question by Shadow Prophet. He asks, how would you go about teaching comms to a team? I'm currently a player and acting as a coach for a mid-diamond team. While I have great knowledge about mechanics, theory and the general idea of how to win Overwatch, I'm struggling to fix my team's communication. They are basically just a bunch of pop stars and they have had great difficulty in working out what the content of the comms should be. Right now they just sort of call out what they see without much knowledge on whether or not that information is important, and this is leading to very confused players, leading to very poor devolved fights. They know to track ults, but when it comes to planning what to do with that knowledge, they get stuck. How do I get players to consistently plan and commit to that plan, whether that is right or wrong? Some players do have the knowledge on what is important, but they lack the confidence to speak consistently or freeze up when it comes to trying to comm whilst playing. So first, let me quickly go over why communication is actually very important. The main benefit of communication is player confidence. So as you mentioned, you have a team of pop stars, which means you have a team of players who are individually skilled, but when you put them into a team together, they're not performing as well. And this is usually caused by a lack of confidence. If they go into a competitive game, they're going to be confident in their ability. That's where they're kind of used to playing. But when you put them into a scrim, they're going to lose out on that confidence, right? Especially if their team isn't communicating a whole lot, which means that even though they're fundamentally good players, they aren't actually able to perform properly, right? So that is the main reason why communication is so important, because it gives everyone on the team confidence, and that confidence will lead to less hesitation, more decisiveness, and overall better individual performance. Now, the most important first step is individual responsibility. The main reason why players don't communicate a lot when they join teams for the first time is because they just aren't sure what you want them to communicate. What I recommend is creating a small document, meeting up with your team, and sharing some basic individual responsibilities for everyone and giving examples of how they should communicate that. The basic calls that every single player has to make are info calls and target calls. Info calls are information like enemies being split, Widowmakers being in certain positions, correcting ult tracking, basic stuff like that. And target calls are again split into two. You have regular target calls and you have so-called echo calls. Target calls are calls that tell the team that you want to see a particular enemy dead. Echoing target calls are very different. They are when someone else on the team calls a target and you repeat that target call. Now, you might think to yourself that doing so is cluttering comms and a waste of space, but quite the opposite. Echoing a target call is actually very important because it tells your teammate that you are on that target with them. There is a big difference between one person shouting diva, diva, diva and one person shouting diva, diva, diva and 4 people echoing that call, because that gives the player confidence that everyone is focusing that diva with them, which means that they can commit and without taking as big of a risk, which is going to lead to, again, less hesitation, more decisiveness, and allows you to confirm more kills. Now, it's very important to understand getting info calls and target calls down should be your first #1 priority. Before you think about advanced strategies or in-game leadership or complex ult planning, if your team isn't sharing information with each other, and if your team isn't sharing target calls with each other, you are going to have a very, very difficult time in game. Once you feel comfortable in these departments, you can start moving on to more complex communication-related concepts. Now, once you're comfortable with your target and echo calls, you can get into very specific comms. So, for example, a Mei calling when she's going to use her wall, a main tank calling when he is pushing up to take space and when he is falling back, or snipers sharing what angles they take. This is character-specific information, and that is again something that's each player's individual responsibility, and you ideally want to cover this with them beforehand so they know exactly what they're supposed to call and what they're not supposed to call. This also includes ult planning. Every single player is responsible for their own ultimate. Your diva player shouldn't have to tell your main tank when to Earthshatter, for example. That is your Reinhardt's responsibility. And one mistake that a lot of teams do that is quite archaic and outdated at this point is to have one dedicated person calling all ultimates going into each fight, but that is a very, very ineffective approach. You can do some general planning, like, hey, let's try to win this fight with a Mei ultimate, but in the end, everyone is responsible for their own ultimates. So if the Mei, for example, thinks that using her ultimate in that fight would be a waste, she doesn't have to use it. And on the other hand, if your Reaper, for example, sees a very, very good opportunity to go for an ultimate of his own, he can go for it without having to ask permission. Again, individual responsibility is very important in order to reduce hesitation and increase decisiveness. Now, once you have basic info and target calls out, and once you have character-specific calls out, now you can start looking into an in-game leader, an IGL, or a team captain. Now, the point behind a team captain or an IGL is to have someone who has the final say regarding very important topics like comp swaps, for example, general playstyle changes, right? The team playing less aggressive or more aggressive, and also making calls after every fight on whether the fight is winnable or if the team should just reset and regroup. The IGL is essentially the person who glues the team together. If someone is slowing down with their comms, he's the one that's reminding them. If the round maybe isn't going as well, he's kind of the cheerleader that keeps the team in a positive headspace. And having one clear team captain makes a very big difference once the fundamental comms of info calls and target calls and character-specific calls are out of the way. Now, communication is a very complex topic, and I obviously can't go into every single point regarding communication. But in the end, the most important points is that you make sure that everyone has individual responsibility when it comes to their communication, that you make sure that players know exactly what they are supposed to call so they can be confident in those calls, and then you make sure to constantly remind them when they are slacking, because it's really just a habit that you have to drill down. Once your communication improves, you should see some very, very dramatic improvements in your team's overall performance. If you want to ask your own questions, simply head down into the description, join the Discord server, and ping me in the Ask Stux Anything channel. You can also follow me on Twitter down in the description, and I'd really appreciate if you could subscribe. My name is Stux, and I'd like to thank you for learning.